man?
What's up, man? I figure you got here early. I'll bring you on. I don't know if Future got held up in a meeting or something like that. So figured you're here early, and I know that this is something that we can talk about. So hey, man, thanks for coming on and help me close out the show as well. It's really
Yeah,
awesome to have you
absolutely.
in 2 days.
Well, how speaking of resilience, then this is a topic that I did not know I was going to be talking on. Um,
Well, I'm going to bring
how?
Yvonne on too, if you're cool with that, and we'll
Yeah,
just
let's do
all
it.
we'll talk through the final two topics together.
Let's do it. Yeah. So, yeah. Speaking of resilience, like how has this been? How has this 2-day event been for you?
Hey!
Hey,
Oh, the gang's all here.
yeah. So we're getting together a little bit early. I think Future got held up in something. So she
Oh,
wasn't able to make it for resilience. So that means that I actually get to have you and Chris a little early. We're going to talk a little bit about resilience and then move into
okay.
cooperation. And Chris just asked me on the concept of resilience, how have the past 2 days been?
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
So Chris, it's an excellent question. And you're a podcaster, so you understand. And I don't, and you're both speakers. So you probably, I don't know if you have the same experience of me, but when I get off of stage, so like when I'm on the stage, it's everything. I give everything to that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And when I
Yeah.
get off the stage and there are people that are waiting to talk to me, I'm still in it. I'm ready. I'm good. Let's talk. Let's connect. Let's find solutions. Let's just form a relationship. And then as soon as it's like, okay, we're
Mm-hmm.
fully done. We're good, crash. I'm like, I could
Yep.
literally just sleep for like the next 8 hours as a nap. So, I have never actually done a full day live stream before. And when I set up the idea, even my marketing team with my publisher was a little bit like, you sure you want to do that? And I was like, yeah, why not? And
Exactly.
and yesterday was amazing. I mean, I think the one benefit, and I think you'll both appreciate this too, when you're surrounded by amazing people, it's really hard
Mhm.
not to be energized by them when they
Yeah.
bring, when they bring that amazing energy and that those amazing ideas. It's really hard not to just lock in and be like, I have these amazing people to talk to. I'm not gonna cash out now. So I
Right.
really, I felt really good all day. I kept my energy there, but
Yeah.
it was in my last talk with George that I noticed my voice was starting to go after the full
Mm.
day. And then it wasn't until after I finished out the entire thing and I hit off that I was like, just crashed. And Chris, you had texted me last night, and I'm sorry that like my response was basically like, meh, not brain, not I done, no more. Bye. Tomorrow, goodbye. Um, so yeah, I mean I will say that the overarching thing is it's been amazing. I've gotten to talk to incredible people. And I was able to bounce back to it today. I gave myself the morning because I thankfully didn't schedule 2 full days, and I feel like I bounced back well. And really part of that is, people like yourselves coming on to talk with me about important topics, and the hope that this sort of content is something that not just lives right now as a live event, but then
Mm.
gets to be chopped up and put out elsewhere and spread, because you know that I believe in this, like with every fiber of my being, and I know you both do too, that
Yeah.
like we can change the culture of work bit by bit, piece by piece. We can make an impact on people.
Hmm.
And if you just take one manager and shift how they lead, it can make ripple effects out into the world. So I think I'm just motivated by the purpose of it all. And overall, I think I feel pretty good, Chris.
Well, let me piggyback off of that, with what you just said, right? Is that you're focusing, speaking of resilience, you're focusing on that purpose and what you're being motivated by that goal, right? And so when we look at resilience, right? When I look at resilience, I think about motivation and how people are resilient to any obstacle that comes their way. And you are, let's cut the crap and the fluffy and just, we know that there's always going to be hard times, right? There's
Yeah.
always going to be
Yep.
the highs, there's going to be the lows. People who pretend like it's all high, right? Like they have the Instagram filter on. That's not real life, right? And so let's be honest about it. And when we see the lows happening, let's acknowledge them and remember why we're there. Let's remember the purpose of what we're doing or the reason of what we're doing and focus on that goal, because that is what's going to help us push past that work. And so I just wanted to like call that out real quick, because that is what you just said is a really good way to help people stay motivated.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, it's be hard to get up if you didn't feel like there was a purpose to get up, you know? And that's really, and before you guys jumped on, I was saying there's a difference between perseverance and resilience. And there's a reason I chose resilience rather than perseverance on the team as a commitment, is that we're not looking to push past failures. We're not looking to push through tough times. We're looking to stop and acknowledge it and notice that it exists, learn the lessons we can from it, share it with each other as a point of connection, as a way of understanding each other better, and then we get back up because we're looking in the same direction towards a goal. So yeah, I really appreciate that, because I think someone earlier was talking about it was Tom Schwab was talking about growth, and he was saying, you know, he kind of indirectly alluded to the fact that the mission, the purpose, is what helps people to focus on growth. This growth is in service of something. I would say the same thing here. Your resilience is in service of something, and that helps you get back up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, it's funny, you know, many people know that Chris is a part of Indelible and we work together very closely. And I am the first one sometimes to go to Chris and be like, dude, it's been like 4 days of like 12, 13, 14-hour days. And like, I got nothing. And he's always great about reframing some of the challenges that I'm going through in the moment. And basically that premise of keeping your eyes on the prize, right? Like, and he reminds me, even in the hardest times and the darkest challenges of it all, with being a leader, a new CEO, all of that, of, you know, reminding me almost of my why. And that, to your point, Jeff, just gives me like so much more energy and so much more tenacity to just keep going. And that's why understanding one's purpose and your own individual why for what it is that you do is so important, because that is what is going to get you through in those hard moments or these long days when you're doing something like this. Or when Chris, like, I remember when Chris, you did that like 24-hour, or maybe it was like
Yeah,
a 12.
it was a 12-hour live stream. Yeah, straight.
Yes, he did a
Oh my God.
12-hour
Yeah.
live stream. Like, I don't think
I
that the
get
man
you.
took a bio
Yeah.
break or anything. I don't know what you had going on over there, but he made it work for 12 hours straight, committed to stopping Asian hate and having some really critical conversations with folks. And I mean, I jumped in, we had a quick conversation, but I've never done anything like that professionally. I've worked really long days and so forth, but I got breaks with engagement, right? But to be on like that for 12 hours straight, like, it was phenomenal to see. And again, what was, you know, the fire underneath, you know, the surface of what people couldn't see is his passion and frustration with wanting to address Asian hate and what was happening in his own neck of the woods out there in San Fran, but what was happening more globally, right? We saw a lot throughout the United States, but it was just that passion, that fire, like, I'm sick of this ish. And we're going to have conversations about it. And I'm fully committed 12 hours straight to get it done. So, you know, my hat is actually off to both of you. Like, talk about Superhero Institute. Like, both of you are my superheroes. You guys are amazing.
So what you're saying is we have to get you on a full day live stream.
Yeah.
I think that's what I heard, Chris. We can give you
Yeah.
pointers. We've both kind of done it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, good luck with that one. Chris knows I'm actually an ambivert, so that would be hard. I could
feel
do
like
it.
Yvonne conference would be amazing.
I don't know if I'm that loved as a leader yet, and I use the words
you are.
yet.
Yeah.
But
I feel like you're
maybe
getting
one day.
two disagreements here on that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you both one question about resilience, and then I want to shift us over to your topic on cooperation. But what does it look like to both of you in your roles as leaders and working with leaders? What does it look like to foster a culture of resilience on teams? How do you go about addressing that so that resilience is a thing that can happen on a team and people are willing to commit that that is a way that we operate?
Yvonne, unless you've got something off the top of your head, I see you looking at me.
I know you got something off the top of your head because you're like, you know, in the midst of onboarding someone right now. So I feel like that's perfect in terms of tactics and tips around resiliency.
Yeah, well, I would start with a warning, right? Is that like resilience should not be coming at the cost of one's own health, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think that, Jeff, you had pointed out the difference between resilience and persistence, right? Persistence is trying to push through those barriers, even at the sake of one's own harm, right? And so, and just disregarding anything else that's happening, right? And that's just continuously pushing through. But resilience is making those adjustments. And so I think with resilience and creating that culture, it's again acknowledging the humanity in the situation and in the moment. There's nothing wrong with someone coming, Yvonne coming to me after a long day and saying, "Oh my gosh, this day was great or horrible. It just took a lot out of me." And just acknowledging that moment of like, "Hey, it's okay. Like, focus on what we're trying to accomplish. And are you taking care of yourself?" And like Yvonne knows, like, I'm
Go
constantly
ahead. You can
texting
spill
her,
the
right? Yeah.
beans. Go ahead.
Right, like, I'm constantly messaging her and texting her and being like, "Hey, have you been eating today? Are you working out? Like, are you taking care of yourself?" Right? And those are the smaller things that leaders, before it was a what happens at work or at home, stops at the door, but
Yep.
that's no longer the case because those things bleed over. As much as we would love to separate and compartmentalize, that's just not how life works. That's not how the human brain works. So let's allow that and acknowledge that and allow people to have their space. And for leaders, understand that resilience comes at a cost of, or not at a cost, but you have to acknowledge the human side and the personal side of those individuals and their needs in order for you to be able to make adjustments and move forward.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. And one thing I just want to add, and then Yvonne, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I think there's a lot of things we can say about the pandemic, and a lot of things we can say negatively about what the impacts, but we can actually point to some things that we have to be somewhat thankful for, which is that I think that the pandemic really illuminated that this idea of checking your personal life at the door, it when you said it, it was like I took it as like kind of metaphorically check it at the door, but like as you were saying it, like my daughter literally like ran up and was like, "Baba." So like it's actually now literally the door is gone because this is work. We're at home. There's no more door, and we have to somehow fit everything together. And for to ask people to fit into any sort of a box, even if we're talking about resilience as a commitment, that's going to mean different things to different people, and it's going to be based around what their unique circumstances. Which is why I've consistently advocated for, and I know you both agree with this, but like talking to the person, not the employee, not treating them like an employee badge number or whatever, or a team member with a title, but like an actual human being that's coming to bring their best self to work, has the best intentions, wants to do good work, but actually needs to be treated as an individual with their own unique criteria. And I think that's the only place that resilience can thrive is when we allow people that space. Yvonne, I want to hear from you about it though.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what is very critical for most folks, I'll say it is for me, is feeling that, going back to our earlier conversation of safety and protection, right? Number one, feeling that I can be transparent with whatever my challenges are that I'm going through with my leader to be able to talk to them and have real conversation. Because my resiliency around, for example, if I'm at home and my kids have learning, and they're on screens all day, right? And I'm trying to be in meetings, and then Chris knows this, his little ones will come in and hey, and all of that, right? And that could be very stressful for some folks, especially if you don't have safety and protection within the dynamic of your team. And so, in order to keep that resiliency up because of this blended environment of both work and home, it's really important to be able to have that transparency, to be able to have vulnerability without judgment, and to really be able to say, you know what? Hashtag this is us. This is us, like in all of our home offices, and screaming kids and dogs barking and screens glitching and tech going left. This is us. This is where we are right now. So we would do ourselves well to be able to I just think accept that, embrace it, and help each other along on that journey. And that's what's going to create overall resiliency. And then I think for employers specifically is being a lot more flexible when it comes to what does the average workday look like. Maybe it used to look like 9 to 5, right? Where we get, we get in the building, we do our thing, we leave out. But now with the challenges that are happening, especially for parents, right? On the home front, we need to be looking at like, just get it done. Right? Like you don't need to clock in at this time and clock in out at that time. If you've got something where you've got to take, Chris got to take Marissa to violin lessons or gymnastics or whatever, right? Like it's really important to be able to say like, hey, that's okay. Take 2-hour break, go do what you got to do. We know the deadline to get it done. That's resiliency. That's agility. That's, strong, lovable leadership.
I love that you brought agility into it because I think resilience is awfully difficult to do without some form of agility in the way of thinking, that you're willing to respond to conditions as they come up and be flexible to it. It's very difficult to be resilient in a rigid environment. And it just feels rote and it feels forced. Whereas in a more agile environment where you're thinking about how do I respond to circumstances, resiliency becomes a benefit within that environment. I want to shift to talking about cooperation because it's such a beautiful segue from resilience into cooperation because they work so hand in hand. And Yvonne, when we were talking about this beforehand, I don't know if you brought it up to me or if Chris brought it up to you and you brought it up to me, or if I don't know if Chris brought it up to me, but we talked about this interesting distinction between cooperation and collaboration. So I want to make sure we do touch on that. But starting at the cooperation side of things, I think one of the things that I've noticed that I've seen in my career, having gone through my MBA and then having worked in more corporate environments and then working for myself and then clients, is that competition seems to be more the norm as a way of operating. We've believed in this idea of like competition yields innovation, competition, the best results, but competition often in the work environment creates some of that toxic culture where it's a little bit of cutthroat, a little bit of backstabbing, a little bit of like me versus them, because there's scarce resources of positions that are open and higher salaries and whatever. So, in the way I see it, cooperation almost always in from a game theory perspective, even typically yields a better overall benefit for the team. So if I take that to be true, let's assume for the sake of the conversation that cooperation typically will yield better results. And competition's the norm. What do you think is sort of the pathway to getting cooperation as the norm in this culture where competition is so embraced and it's so the norm?
Yeah, I think it's very much the I versus we perspective right off the bat, right? I think cooperation, and Chris, it's interesting because Chris and I talked about this a little bit recently about, this notion of the individual rewards that we're seeking when we're trying to cooperate with one another, right? It feels, even just the tone of the word to me has always felt forced, right? Like you two, we talked about in the context of kids, like you two go play, right? You two cooperate, right? It's almost like this mandate, if you will, from two people who really don't want to play together. Right. And so it's kind of like a forced environment that you're trying to create versus like, for example, when we talk about that distinction with collaboration, that's really about wanting to see one another succeed in addition to coming together around a shared goal. Right. And so cooperation, I'll be honest with you, I'm just not a big fan of that concept overall when it comes to the workplace environment and so forth. I want to see leaders, especially lovable leaders, right, talk more about collaboration, bringing their arms around each other as a team and working together towards that shared goal versus this and here's my contribution to whatever the goal is. And I do that. And like this cup of coffee, I'm going to sit it right here. And okay, I did my job and I'm out.
Can I just pause you for a moment there? Because that is a beautiful distinction. And I'm actually going to change the next version of the Lovable Leader edition.
Oh,
no. Oh, no. I'm telling you this is a good thing because that's a really important distinction. because cooperation can actually feel like that. You know, we just need you to cooperate. Cooperate doesn't actually involve any real engagement, whereas collaboration, what you're talking about, is actually the part where the overlap happens. And wow, I'm actually like thinking about this section and thinking what a broad oversight that is, to not see the depth of where collaboration actually adds where cooperation doesn't. So you've definitely influenced the very next iteration of the book that goes live. So thank you for that. Before I even record the audiobook, I'm going to make that change actually.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm glad to add that
Well, this is
value. Go,
well, I was
Chris.
gonna
Go,
say
go,
this
go.
is I mean, this is the value of collaboration.
Yeah,
Collaboration.
Right,
it's
right
happening
here,
live
right?
right
It's
now.
literally, yeah. So
So
yeah, I
meta.
mean, the thing I wanted to, there's a lot of examples that we see in this. And for those of you who may not have kids or aren't used to that like go play together kind of mentality, most of us have gone through at least high school and college having done school projects together,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That is a cooperative mindset. It's, hey, I'm putting you into a group, figure it out and cooperate, right? And like make sure you are all getting a grade, because like that is the end goal, is to get a good grade so everyone gets that grade. But we all know there's that one person in the group that doesn't quite pull their weight, and yet they're still going to get the same grade as the rest of the group, and the rest of the group has to then scramble to make up for that lack of work. So cooperation is not necessarily a pooling of resources, right?
Mm.
That's what collaboration, I see
Yeah.
collaboration as more, I'm willing to come together and bring all of my resources that I can to this
Yeah.
table, and let's figure it out, right? Let's make 1 and 1 equal 3. That is collaboration. Let's not just add value for myself and have you add value for yourself, but let's add value together so the sum of our parts are more than its whole.
This is such an oh my god, I'm loving that this distinction, because cooperation now in the context of this conversation and expanding it with collaboration, cooperation feels like don't make waves, don't get in any fights, make it through it together. Whereas collaboration is saying bring your unique strengths to the table for the benefit of
Yes.
everybody. And I really appreciate that the nuance there, that one really is more what we're looking for. We're not looking for team members who tolerate one another to get through an assignment. We're looking
Right.
for all of them to actually bring their best selves to it, and not be in competition with one another. But I actually came up with a term that I wrote a little while back called cooperation, which is basically where you want all of the people on the team bringing their best work so that you're in cooperation to try and get the best outcome. So you're in competition to a certain extent with them, but you want them at their best and you're both collaborating to get to that better goal. But it's
Right.
like, you don't want to beat them. You
Right.
want to both win. You want to win in a competition where everybody gives it their best.
Right. Like a relay race, essentially,
Yeah.
right? A relay race, when you think about it metaphorically, right? It's both of these people doing their own job, if you will, right? At their pace, the best that they could possibly bring to it. But they have to collaborate. They have to collaborate in terms of signaling to one another, the right handoff at the right speed, at the right position, all of that. That's not cooperation. That cooperation says, hey, just make sure you grab the thing out of my hand when I come for you. Collaboration has another level, I feel like, of intentionality, right? And what you and Chris talked about, like adding those resources, adding those insights. And Chris's mathematical equation for that is brilliant. And I don't know if all the listeners caught that when he said 1 + 1 = 3. In cooperation, 1 + 1 = 2. You do your part, I do my part, right? But
Yeah.
what you see in the 1 + 1 = 3 is your value, my value, and then the overarching goal. So we actually come out ahead. And that's where I feel like collaboration perhaps trumps cooperation,
Yeah.
and you get so much more out of it.
I love it. I love it. I'm just thinking of the what is the process of revising a book at this point? But
Oh,
it's all good. It's all good. I love that you brought it up because it is such an important point. And while I still believe that cooperation in the scheme of 8 commitments to the team is a good thing, I now
yes.
I now actually believe that collaboration is, if you made those 8 commitments that I've got there, you got an amazing team. It's going to be great. But if you add collaboration instead of cooperation, you go a little bit
Yes.
deeper. We're now taking it that one step even further. So addition number 2, courtesy of Yvonne and Chris, is going to be collaboration instead of cooperation.
Well, Jeff, real quick, you had mentioned it, right? Is cooperation, and I wanted to highlight this, is a certain level of commitment.
Mm.
Collaboration is a next level of engagement, right?
Yes.
And so
Mm.
cooperation, you're committing to a certain goal, but with the collaborative piece, anyone who's been in a collaborative team or environment knows that there's a far higher engagement level between individuals for that goal. So that's something I just wanted to highlight that you had mentioned. And to add on to, your previous, or to your original question of like, well, how do you make that shift, right? How do you shift from a competitive environment into a cooperative or collaborative environment? Is you create that overarching goal and affect the individual's goals themselves for people, their people
Mm.
goals, and you link it there, right? And so that will allow you to get buy-in and that commitment that you need from them to make sure that that overarching goal is going to be achieved, right? You create that link, and so you say you want you want to be competitive, you have this mentality of motivation to be competitive. Totally fine. You can still acknowledge that competitiveness, but just
Mhm.
frame it just a little bit different, just shift that mentality just a slight bit so that the competition is not against their own team members, but is in competition to accomplish the goal at hand.
Yes, and I love the way that you position that, because you mentioned something that I do in the framework, sitting on the same side of the table, which is you want to align your goals with the person you're talking with, right? So if you have a team and you have several people on the team that you want to cooperate or you want to collaborate, the easiest way that you're probably going to be able to do that is by understanding what each of their respective goals are, understanding how those connect with, overlap, or align with the goals of the team, and then have a discussion with them about how in their work together collaboratively allows them both to achieve the goals that they want, and how competitively it actually doesn't benefit either of them better or the team. So it becomes an open dialogue around the value of collaboration and cooperation as a commitment of the team, so that we can get where we're going together safely.
Yeah. And there's both real-time benefits to that and then long-term when you think
Yes.
about it, right? So it's not just for that particular project, but it's what that deeper level of engagement actually nets out for the long-term benefit of the team. And that's team cohesion, right? Is that
Yep.
people they become almost a marketing term sticky with one another, right? And then next thing you know, they want to not cooperate more frequently, they want to collaborate more frequently, because hopefully it's been a mutually beneficial experience for them. So then it becomes like you just mentioned a few moments ago, right? Myself, you, and Chris, it's like, okay, so how can we do some things together, right? I think we've talked about that a little bit. Chris and I have talked about that, about just when collaboration is done well and you have people coming with the best parts of themselves to around a particular goal, to a particular project or whatever, and it goes really well. It's just magic. I mean, it's just magic. And then you crave it and you want more of it. And that starts to build a bunch of skills. And to your earlier point, that makes them so much better when it comes to resiliency, because now you have collaboration and team cohesion. And so the resiliency level is higher.
I love it. And another distinction that just occurred to me as you were saying that is that in cooperation, you still have the presence of egos that people have to potentially just put on ice to get through something. Whereas with collaboration, people willingly set aside their egos in service of the thing that they're working on together. I think about any project where I've ever come in to collaborate with. It's like, I'm just going to come in, I'm going to give my best for this thing that we're all working towards together. And you set that ego to the side to collaborate towards the bigger goal. Whereas in
Yeah.
cooperation, again, I agree with you that there's this I can't stop thinking of like the just don't make waves. Like the
Mm.
cooperation is like, just don't get in a fight. Just don't fight with each other. So the competition piece there is like, just don't compete with each other. So it's bad. Just get through the whole thing. It'll be fine. Whereas collaboration, I'm seeing the impact of, we set our egos aside. We bring the best part of ourselves. 1 + 1 = 3. So I love this distinction that you've all presented. I do want to put a pin in it though, just because I only have a few minutes left with you before we have to wrap the event. And I did want to leave time for this one part of the whole thing. Chris, you were my opening event for day one. People first leadership. I love what you're doing out in the world. Extraordinary. Yvonne, you were my day 2 opening act. We talked about safety. We talked about protection. Now I have you both here to close out the event. And I brought everybody that I brought onto these events. I brought to the 2 days. I brought on because they're amazing. I brought them on because they have amazing things to say. They're doing the actual work that inspires me and that I get to learn from. I want to just turn the end of my event over to the 2 of you to just share anything that you think wasn't covered in the conversations that you've heard or been a part of, that you think are important for new leaders to know about, for new leaders to be a part of, and for new leaders to think about as they journey towards becoming the best possible leaders they can become.
Yeah, so I'll share. I'll piggyback off of or repeat something I shared yesterday a little bit. But the number one thing that I think leaders need to do is to take care of yourself. Very often, leaders, and especially women leaders, are asked to sacrifice for the greater good, right? I mean, women at home are asked to sacrifice for the family, right? Women in the workplace are asked to put things aside or, not worry about those things. But again, we want to make sure that as leaders, we are taking care of our own emotional and mental and physical health, because that will allow us to bring the best version of ourselves to the table, right? Whatever analogy you want to use, you can't pour from an empty cup. Put the oxygen mask on first. Those are there for a reason. We have those cliches for a reason. So understand what you need to do to grow and figure out what your strengths are to best serve the team. And that, again, goes back to what I shared yesterday, is that understand yourself, know yourself better, learn about yourself, take that time to reflect, because for you to know yourself, the best version of yourself and the worst version of yourself, you can understand how you can best serve your team and help them succeed. If you know that one of their opportunities for growth is, say, learning about business finances, and you as a manager are not good at business finance, you're not going to be able to help that team or that team member as much as you would like to pretend to. So be a people first leader to serve them and help them grow by acknowledging your own opportunities and shortcomings and finding ways for them to grow and be successful in their role.
Woohoo!
I love it. Yvonne?
So I'm going to as well harken back to something I said to you earlier, Jeff, and that is I believe it's critical that leaders learn to be, when we talk about this premise of like learning to get more comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think leaders have to learn how to get more comfortable with being vulnerable. And that's not something, again, as we mentioned earlier, is not talked about in business school and all that. We don't teach those skills. And that's a critical miss, I think, in the education system, as well as within workplaces, right? When we're talking about professional development and all of that, I've never seen anything that had like vulnerability 101, right? If it wasn't for, when we think about it, if it wasn't for Brene Brown, we probably wouldn't even be talking about vulnerability, right, in the workplace, and what that really looks like and how that's actually a strength. So I would encourage leaders, if you want to be most effective, right? You want to get optimal engagement of your teams, and you want to truly be a lovable leader, you have to start first with vulnerability. And that means taking off the mask, taking down all of those other trappings and exterior definitions of what a leader should be, and blaze the trail yourself with vulnerability and authenticity. And I don't think that I would imagine that most teams, and this is what I've seen too, appreciate that. Right. Like I will say that even for my own team, I talked a little bit about my own vulnerability earlier. And there are so many other ways that I make it a point to be transparent with my team so that they then can feel like they can be transparent back. And that's how we get to this place of not only just identifying capabilities and skill sets or areas for opportunity, but also we learn how to support one another better. And that whole concept is wrapped up or wrapped around, I should say, being a lovable leader and realizing that love that it could and should exist in the workplace. And if we did care for one another, our teammates, as much as we care, hopefully, for our loved ones and family, both worlds will be better. And I know that that's something that the three of us have consistently talked about is how do we bring this to make it a better world? And all of the things that you've been talking about, Jeff, from a leadership perspective, lend itself to the outside world as well.
I completely agree. And I'm so happy that you've mentioned Brene Brown a couple times because fun fact, I was listening to her book, The Power of Vulnerability. And at one point she actually, I think she's speaking to a group of business people in that talk. And she asks people if they've ever talked about love at work or something like that. And she goes about defining love and looks at, she asked all of these people these questions like, what is love and how would you define it? And some of the things that came up were trust, respect, and kindness. So when it came time for me to think about how we talk about the book, trust, respect, and kindness is how we're building these great teams. And that's many of the people described as present when you have love. So even though the title a lot of times makes people think of like the hippy dippy fluffy kind of like, oh, we're just going to have a great time at work and love our boss. It's really about what are the elements that we can learn from about what it is when we love someone or something. What does that look like? And what are those elements? And how can we bring that into the workplace in obviously a very appropriate way, but in service of creating environments that people love to come to, where people are willing to follow you towards a big and ambitious goal that aligns with their purpose, that aligns with their goals, that aligns with what they want. And how can that possibly change the future of our world if this is what it looked like at work? So that's why I wrote the book. And I cannot thank both of you enough for being part of my network, of being part of my friend group, of challenging me, of being people that I can learn from, and even post launch of the book, learn something that can actually deepen the concepts in the book and make it better. So I sincerely appreciate you both being here for the openings, for the closing, and being supporters of this whole thing. And just know that you are never unnoticed by me for what you're doing.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And again, congrats again. So happy for you.
Yes.
I cannot wait to get this my hands on this book, man. Yeah, do the dance, man. You got lots to celebrate.
Exactly. You made it. Yeah.